On a rainy night, millionaire William Carter takes in a homeless girl and a baby at his mansion, unaware of what is to come. What begins as an act of compassion quickly transforms into a plot of mystery and shock as dark secrets come to light, testing limits and revealing that not everything is as it seems. How far will William be willing to go when the truth is finally revealed? William Carter was driving through the streets of Chicago that night, his hands firmly on the wheel and his thoughts lost. The torrential rain battered the city, and the constant sound of raindrops on the roof of his luxurious Bentley reflected his melancholy. At 52, William was a successful man, the owner of one of the largest technology companies in the country. But inside the warm car, the emptiness of his soul felt greater than ever. Since losing his wife, Elizabeth, and his daughter, Charlotte, in a car accident years ago, he had been living only for work, isolated in the cavernous silence of his mansion. As he approached a dark intersection, something caught his attention. On the opposite sidewalk, under a nearly ineffective awning against the rain, stood a skinny girl, looking no older than 10, holding a baby wrapped in a soaked blanket. William slowed down, frowning as he observed the scene. The wind whipped against the two of them, and the girl's clothes clung to her small body. She held the baby tightly against her chest as if her life depended on it. "They're going to freeze," William murmured, swallowing hard. One part of him wanted to just drive on. That situation wasn't his problem, and he knew that helping could bring complications. However, the girl's face, pale and tense, made him hesitate. Something in her expression reminded him of Charlotte at that age. With a heavy sigh, he pulled over and rolled down the window. "Hey!" he called, his voice harsher than he intended. The girl turned her face slowly, her large, wary eyes staring at him, while the baby let out a faint whimper. "You can't stay out here in this cold. You're going to die of hypothermia." She clutched the baby even tighter, as if trying to protect it from words as well. I don't have anywhere to go," Emma replied, her voice trembling, not only from the cold but from fear. William took a deep breath. The last thing he wanted was to get involved, but something inside him prevented him from leaving them there. "Get in the car. I have a safe place for you to stay tonight." Emma hesitated, looking at the luxurious car and then at William. Her instincts told her not to trust him, but the baby in her arms, with lips turning purple from the cold, was her priority. After a few seconds, she took a hesitant step toward the car, soaking the interior even more as she sat down with the baby in her lap. William closed the door, took one last look at the rain outside, and murmured to himself, "What the hell am I doing?" He knew that that night would be just the beginning of something much bigger. Months had passed since William began the adoption process. Finally, on that sunny day, he entered the courthouse accompanied by Emma and Max, feeling a mix of anxiety and joy. Emma held his hand tightly while Max babbled in his arms, oblivious to the gravity of the moment. The judge, a stern-looking man with a gentle voice, read the decision with a discreet smile. "Mr. Carter, it is with great pleasure that I grant the adoption of Emma and Max Carter. From today on, you are an official family under the law." Emma looked at William, her eyes shining with emotion. He smiled, bending down to speak to her at her eye level. "It's official now, Emma. You and Max are home." Emma hugged him tightly, and for the first time, her tears were not of fear or sadness, but of relief and happiness. Back at the mansion, the atmosphere was one of celebration. The staff had prepared a special lunch in the garden, with flowers decorating the tables and balloons floating in the breeze. Max was sitting in a high chair, laughing and throwing pieces of cake on the floor, while Emma ran barefoot on the grass, laughing loudly. William, sitting in a wicker chair on the porch, watched the two of them. The sunlight illuminated Emma's face as she played with Max, helping him crawl on the grass. He felt a tightness in his heart, but this time it was one of gratitude. For years, his life had been shrouded in darkness caused by loss. The mansion, with all its luxury, was merely a gilded cage, filled with painful memories. But now that same place was alive again. "Mr. Carter," said Taylor, interrupting his thoughts as he brought a tray with lemonade, "I think I've never seen the house so full of laughter." William smiled, accepting a glass. "Neither have I, Taylor. Neither have I." He continued to watch Emma and Max, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in years. His painful past was still there, but it no longer consumed him. Caring for Emma and Max not only gave them a home, but also healed a part of his own soul. When Emma looked at him and waved, with Max waving his little hands beside her, William waved back, feeling complete for the first time in a long time. "My family," he murmured to himself, a sincere smile lighting up his face. And so, on that sunny day, a new chapter began. It was not just a happy ending. It was a beginning full of hope, love, and possibilities. The automatic gate of the Carter mansion opened slowly, revealing the imposing structure that looked even more grand under the constant rain. The light-colored stone facade, illuminated by floodlights, highlighted the arches and columns of classical inspiration. William parked the car in front of the main entrance and got out, opening the door for the girl, who hesitated before stepping out. Emma held the baby tightly, her restless eyes examining the mansion's grand exterior. Upon entering the foyer, their footsteps echoed on the polished marble floors. The space was immense, with a high ceiling adorned with crystal chandeliers that cast bright reflections on the walls decorated with paintings by renowned artists. Lit fireplaces in different rooms spread a welcoming warmth, but Emma seemed to feel no comfort, only more distrust. "Taylor!" called William, and within seconds an elegant woman in her 60s appeared. She was the housekeeper who looked at Emma and the baby with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Bring dry clothes for them, and prepare something warm to eat." "Yes, Mr. Carter," replied the housekeeper, disappearing down the hallway. William turned to Emma. "Follow me." Emma followed him with careful steps as he led her to a cozy living room, where a fireplace cast dancing shadows on the walls lined with shelves full of books. He indicated a plush armchair near the fire, but Emma preferred to sit on the floor, still holding the baby, who was now making small whimpering sounds of hunger. Minutes later, Taylor returned with dry clothes and a tray of steaming soup, fresh bread, and milk. As Emma changed out of her wet clothes and settled in, William watched her closely. She seemed such a fragile and out-of-place figure in that opulent room that he almost felt uncomfortable in his own home. When Emma began to eat, William sat in the nearby armchair and tried to make conversation. "What's your name?" She stared at him for a few seconds before responding in a low tone. "Emma. And the baby?" "Max. He's my brother," she said, offering a piece of bread to the little one, who grabbed it eagerly. William leaned forward, intrigued. "Where are your parents?" Emma stopped chewing, her eyes shining with a mix of sadness and distrust. "My mom, she disappeared." "Disappeared?" He frowned, the word hanging heavily in the air. She simply nodded, looking at the baby as if she wanted to end the subject. "I take care of Max now. He needs me." The girl's determined tone impressed William, but it also made it clear that she was not willing to share more. He decided not to press her that night. He stood up and instructed that a room be prepared for the two of them. As he walked to his quarters, William felt the weight of a mystery that seemed much larger than a girl and a baby showing up at his door. Something didn't add up, and he knew that the answer would come only at the right moment. Later that night, William was in the living room, reluctantly reading a work report while thinking about Emma's mysterious story. His thoughts were interrupted by a low cry coming from the children's room. He quickly got up and went there, finding Emma trying to comfort Max, who was restless with a flushed face and a warm body. "He's sick," Emma said with a trembling voice, her large eyes filled with worry. "He's never been like this before." William realized the seriousness of the situation. Without hesitation, he picked up the phone and called Dr. Thompson, a retired doctor who lived nearby and had treated his family for years. Shortly after, the doctor arrived, bringing a medical bag and a calm expression that eased any environment. Emma hesitated, holding Max tightly as Dr. Thompson approached. "I just want to help, dear," the doctor said gently, sitting down next to her. Emma looked at William, seeking some reassurance. He nodded, and only then did she allow the doctor to examine Max. During the examination, Emma stayed by the baby's side, holding his little hand, her eyes fixed on Max's face as if her presence was the only shield he had. William watched everything, impressed by the intensity of her protection. After assessing Max, Dr. Thompson announced, "He has a fever due to a mild infection, but it's not serious. With a little rest and the right medication, he will be fine." Emma took a deep breath, relieved, but still kept the baby close to her as the doctor explained the necessary care. After saying goodbye to William, Thompson left, leaving the three of them alone again. William offered Emma a hot tea and, after much insistence, managed to convince her to sit on the living room sofa. Max was sleeping in her arms, his little chest rising and falling slowly. "You take very good care of him," William said, breaking the silence. "He's all I have," Emma replied, her voice low and a sadness weighing on each word. William hesitated for a moment, looking at the fire in the fireplace. Finally, he spoke. "You remind me of my daughter Charlotte. She would be your age now, if she were alive." Emma looked up at him, surprised by the revelation. "What happened to her?" He swallowed hard before answering. "An accident. It was an accident." His voice faltered, but he soon regained his composure. "Since then, this house has been very quiet." There was a long silence until Emma spoke, hesitantly. "I don't trust adults. They always promise things and never keep them." "Why?" William asked gently. Emma looked down, smoothing the blanket around Max. "Because they lie. I ran away from an orphanage. They said they would take care of me, but they just made us work and kept the money. And when we complained, they punished us." William felt his chest tighten upon hearing those words. "Is that why you ran away?" She nodded, holding Max closer. "And when I found Max, I knew I had to take care of him. He is my brother now, even if not for real." William remained silent, absorbing the story. Emma had suffered more in her short life than many people do in an entire lifetime. He knew he couldn't let those two go back to the streets. "Emma," he said firmly but gently, "you and Max are going to stay here for as long as you need. I will find a way to help you, but for now, this house is your home." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. She just nodded, murmuring a barely audible, "Thank you." As the night went on, William realized that something unexpected was happening. For the first time in years, he felt a genuine connection with someone. After a tense night, the Carter mansion was enveloped in a deep silence, broken only by the soft crackling of the firewood burning in the fireplace. Emma was sitting on the living room sofa, holding Max in her arms. The baby had finally fallen asleep, his small face calm and his rhythmic breathing showing that the fever had subsided. Emma, however, looked exhausted. Her eyes struggled to stay open, but the battle against fatigue was brief. Unbeknownst to her, she leaned back, still holding Max, and fell asleep, the blanket that wrapped them seeming like a protective cocoon. William stood at the entrance of the room, watching the scene with a mix of surprise and emotion that he hadn't expected to feel. The soft glow of the fireplace illuminated the contours of Emma's face, revealing a child who carried much more weight than she should. He crossed his arms and sighed, feeling something strange and familiar at the same time. For the first time in years, that huge cold space didn't seem so empty. The presence of the two, even with all the unknown baggage they brought, had broken the isolation he had imposed on himself. Walking slowly so as not to wake them, William adjusted a blanket that was slipping and looked at Max for a few seconds. The little one murmured something in his sleep, and William realized how completely that baby depended on Emma, a girl who clearly hadn't had the same sheltered childhood that his daughter Charlotte had. William stepped back quietly and discreetly called Taylor, his housekeeper. "Prepare a comfortable room for the two of them," he whispered. "Something cozy that doesn't feel intimidating." Taylor raised an eyebrow, surprised by the request, but simply nodded before leaving. When she returned to the living room, William took a book from the shelf and sat in a nearby armchair. He pretended to be reading, but his eyes kept returning to Emma and Max, asleep together. Thoughts filled his mind, bringing back memories of Charlotte when she was little. How many times had he seen her sleeping on the sofa, with Elizabeth making sure she was always comfortable and safe? Old guilt returned, but this time mixed with something new. A feeling of unexpected tenderness. William realized that, for the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone. He closed the book and looked at the clock. It was late, but he didn't feel sleepy. Instead, he began to formulate a plan. The next day, he would seek answers. Who was Emma really? What happened to their mother? And how could he ensure that she and Max wouldn't return to the streets? With one last look at the two, William turned off the main light, leaving only the glow of the fireplace to fill the room. He slowly climbed the stairs, feeling something different, something he hadn't felt since the day he lost his family, a purpose. The sun had barely risen when a scream echoed through the halls of the Carter mansion, breaking the morning silence. William woke up startled, his heart racing. He quickly put on the satin robe that was hanging next to his bed and ran down the stairs following the direction of the screams. "Mr. Carter! Mr. Carter!" Taylor, the housekeeper, was standing at the door of the room where Max should have been sleeping. Her face was pale, and her hands were trembling. "What's happening?" William asked, entering the room at once. The sight before him made his stomach churn. Max was alone in the makeshift crib, crying softly. The blanket that wrapped him was crumpled on the floor, and his little arm showed a faint red mark, as if something had been applied there. William bent down to pick up the baby, trying to calm him while looking around, searching for Emma. "Where's Emma?" he asked, turning to Taylor. I don't know, sir," the housekeeper stammered. "I went in to see if they needed anything, and I found the baby like this, but she's not here." William's heart raced. He handed Max to Taylor, ordering her to take care of the baby while he went in search of answers. After searching the rooms and corridors of the mansion with no sign of Emma, he decided to check the security cameras. In the office, William activated the surveillance system and began reviewing the footage from the previous night. Among the recordings, he saw Emma leaving the room where she had been sleeping around 3 in the morning. The grainy image showed the girl entering the makeshift nursery with something in her hands. He increased the brightness of the monitor, trying to identify what she was carrying. It looked like a small syringe or some vial. The next recording showed Emma kneeling beside the crib, handling Max carefully. She frequently looked around, as if fearing being caught. After a few minutes, she hurried out of the room and disappeared around the side of the mansion. William paused the recording, his hand trembling on the mouse. He leaned back in the leather chair, trying to process what he had seen. "It can't be," he murmured, his mind flooded with doubts and suspicions. Taylor entered the office, holding Max in her arms. "Mr. Carter, what will we do? That girl, she could be dangerous. We should call the police." William didn't respond immediately. The idea of Emma, that fragile and protective girl, trying to harm Max seemed inconceivable. But the images didn't lie. "No, not yet," he finally said, standing up. "I need to understand what really happened before making a decision." Taylor hesitated but nodded, leaving the office to take care of Max. William looked back at the frozen screen, with the image of Emma sneaking out of the room. He knew he needed to find the girl and uncover the truth, but what he had seen so far only raised more questions than answers. William found Emma curled up behind one of the tall bushes in the vast garden of the mansion. She was hugging her knees, hiding her face while sobbing softly. The thin morning light highlighted her silhouette, making her appear even more fragile. "Emma!" William's voice was firm but not aggressive. He knelt beside her. "I need you to tell me the truth. What happened to Max?" Emma slowly lifted her face, revealing swollen red eyes. She shook her head, her trembling lips unable to form words. William took a deep breath, trying to contain the mix of frustration and concern that overwhelmed him. "You can't hide from this," he said, softening his tone. "I saw the cameras. I saw you in the room. If there's something I need to know, tell me now." Emma finally broke down, a stream of words spilling out between her sobs. I was just trying to help. Max isn't my brother, okay? I found him a few days ago, at the door of a church. He was there, alone, crying. There was no one around. I couldn't leave him there." William was paralyzed by the revelation, but let her continue. I said he was my brother because no one helps a girl alone. And if someone found out he wasn't my brother, they would take him away from me." She rubbed her eyes with the sleeves of her shirt. "Last night he started crying and got hot. I thought he was going to die. My mom, before she disappeared, she always said that a mixture of herbs helped when I was sick. I tried to do the same. I took some things from the kitchen and used them on him. That's what I did. I swear, I just wanted him to be okay." Emma's voice broke at the end, and she collapsed into tears again. William felt his chest tighten, torn between relief and sadness. She was not a threat to Max. On the contrary, she was trying to protect him in every way she knew, even if it was clumsy and desperate. He ran a hand over his face, absorbing everything she had said. Then in a calmer voice, he spoke. Emma, you didn't have to do this alone. If he was sick, you should have called me. I didn't know if I could trust you, she shouted, looking at him with eyes shining with anger and fear. Adults always promise to help, but they just make things worse. William hesitated for a moment, trying to find the right words. He realized that, for Emma, the world was a place full of empty promises and dangers. I'm not perfect, he said, lowering his voice. But if you and Max stay here, I promise I will do everything I can to make sure you are safe. No one will hurt you or him. Emma stared at him, her breath still ragged from sobbing. You're not going to take him away? No, William replied firmly. Max is part of you now, and I won't separate you. But from now on, we will take care of him together. Deal? After a long silence, Emma slowly nodded. The tension in her face seemed to ease a little. William reached out to help her up, and the two walked back to the mansion. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but at that moment, he felt he had gained something precious. Emma's trust. That same afternoon, William contacted Dr. Thompson for a new appointment with Max. The doctor welcomed them with a warm smile and carefully examined the baby, checking vital signs and symptoms. Max is recovering well, Thompson said as he adjusted his stethoscope. The fever has gone down, and he seems stable, but he will need constant care in the coming days. It's important to keep him hydrated, fed, and to monitor any changes in behavior. William nodded, relieved. And what about his future? Is he going to be okay? Yes, the doctor replied, but he needs a safe and stable environment, a routine that offers the protection he clearly hasn't had until now. The doctor's words echoed in William's mind as he looked at Emma, who was sitting in an armchair nearby, holding Max with the same determination as always. He remembered her words in the garden about how she found Max abandoned and decided to protect him at all costs. Despite her youth and the difficulties she faced, she saved the baby from a tragic fate. On the way back to the mansion, William remained silent, but his thoughts were racing. He had already lost his family once. Now something inside him told him that he could not abandon Emma and Max, not after everything he knew about them. When they got home, he called Emma to talk. She was hesitant but agreed to sit with him in the living room while Max slept peacefully in a basket near the fireplace. Emma, William began, his voice calm but firm. I've been thinking a lot about you and Max. I know you don't trust adults, and you have every reason not to. But I want you to know that I'm not going to leave you alone. Emma frowned, suspicious. What does that mean? It means you're going to stay here with me, he replied, until we find a permanent solution. You will have a home, food, and Max will get the care he needs. I want you to feel safe because you both deserve that. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly turned her face, trying to hide her emotion. And if you change your mind? What if you decide you don't want to help anymore? William leaned in, looking directly at her. I won't change my mind, but I want you to help me too. I don't know much about taking care of a baby, but you do. We can do this together, if you let me. Emma looked at Max and then at William. There was a long silence before she finally murmured, Okay, but I don't want anyone to take him away. William nodded, I promise. That same night, William contacted trusted social workers, explaining Emma and Max's situation. He knew it was necessary to legalize their stay with him, but he also knew the system was complicated. Still, he was willing to face whatever was necessary. As he filled out the initial documents and asked questions to the lawyer he had hired, William had an unexpected thought. The idea of adopting Emma and Max, of creating a new family, no longer seemed so impossible. For the first time in years, he felt a purpose that went beyond his work or his own pain. Emma peeked from the office door, watching William work. She didn't understand everything he was doing, but for some reason she felt she could trust him. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. William knew that to secure Emma and Max's future, he needed to understand the full context of their stories. After several phone calls and meetings, he managed to get in touch with social workers responsible for the area where Emma claimed to have lived before running away. Yes, Mr. Carter, said a woman named Mrs. Jenkins, in a professional tone as she flipped through files during the video call. Emma was in the custody of a local orphanage, St. Agnes Home, but we have been receiving reports of neglect and poor conditions at the facility for some time. William frowned. And what have you done about it? Mrs. Jenkins hesitated. We are investigating, but these cases can be complicated. We need concrete evidence before intervening, and children often fear testifying. Complicated, William replied, his voice firm. Emma is just a child and she ran away. Isn't that enough proof that something is wrong? The social worker sighed. I understand your frustration, Mr. Carter. You are right. The conditions at St. Agnes are not ideal, but nothing, William interrupted, his tone sharp. I will check it out myself. Without wasting any time, he arranged a visit to the orphanage. When he arrived, the sight shocked him. The building was in ruins, with peeling walls and an atmosphere that conveyed more sadness than hope. A middle-aged woman, who introduced herself as the director, greeted him with a tense smile. What brings you here, Mr. Carter? She asked, her posture stiff. William got straight to the point. I'm here for Emma. She ran away from this place. I want to understand why. The woman hesitated, adjusting her glasses. I cannot comment on individual cases. If Miss Emma left, it was because she did not adapt to our rules. Rules? What kind of rules make a 10-year-old child run away and prefer to live on the streets? William's voice was sharp. The director avoided his gaze, but William noticed the faces of some children peeking through the ajar doors. Their expressions were filled with fear, just as Emma had described. During the conversation, he realized that the director was avoiding speaking openly about the conditions of the orphanage. One of the assistants, visibly uncomfortable, let slip that the staff were instructed to ignore certain minor needs of the children, such as regular meals or adequate rest time. William was outraged. Before leaving, he took photos of the place and recorded part of the conversation. The director tried to stop him, but he ignored her objections, determined to use that as evidence. Back at his mansion, William reviewed the images and called Mrs. Jenkins again. You wanted evidence? Now you have it. This cannot continue. This will be more than enough to open a formal investigation, she assured him. With Emma and Max's future in mind, William knew he couldn't wait for the process to conclude before taking action. That experience only reinforced his desire to protect the two. He called his lawyer and began organizing the necessary paperwork to request custody. Weeks had passed since Emma and Max entered William's life. The mansion, once silent and cold, was now filled with the sounds of laughter, hurried footsteps, and sometimes Max's cries. The staff, who had previously maintained a professional distance, also seemed more cheerful, often helping Emma or entertaining the baby. William, observing this new dynamic, realized how much his life had changed. The loneliness that had consumed him for years had given way to a sense of purpose. Sitting in his favorite armchair, he found himself smiling as he watched Emma trying to teach Max to crawl on a soft rug near the fireplace. That night, while the two slept, William made a definitive decision. He called his lawyer, Mr. Bradley, explaining his intention to officially adopt Emma and Max. Are you sure about this, Mr. Carter? The lawyer asked on the other end of the line. More than ever, William replied. These children need a family, and to be honest, I think I need them too. In the following days, William faced the complex bureaucracy of the adoption system. There were documents to sign, interviews to conduct, and home inspections. But he was determined to overcome each obstacle. Emma, however, seemed restless about the changes. One night, while William was reviewing papers in his office, Emma appeared at the door, hesitant. Do you have a minute? She asked softly, holding one of the dolls that Taylor had bought for her. William looked up, noticing her serious expression. Of course, Emma. I always have time for you. What's wrong? She entered, sitting in the chair in front of his desk, and fiddled with the doll's hair before finally speaking. Why are you doing all this? To keep us here with you. Like, forever. William leaned back in his chair, surprised by the question. Yes, that's exactly what I want. And what if you change your mind? She looked at him with eyes full of doubt and fear. Adults always change their minds. They say they'll stay and then disappear. William felt his heart tighten. He stood up and went to her. kneeling so their eyes were at the same level. "Emma," he began, his voice firm but full of tenderness, "I know people have disappointed you before, and I can't change what happened in the past. But I want you to know one thing. I will never abandon you or Max. Never." She stared at him, still suspicious, but something in her expression softened. "Do you promise?" "I promise," he said, holding her small hands. "You are my family now, and family doesn't abandon each other." Emma hesitated but finally hugged him, a shy gesture that made William feel an inexplicable warmth in his chest. In that moment, William realized that the bond between them had grown even stronger. It wasn't just the legal responsibility he was taking on, but also the promise to be the anchor that Emma and Max needed to start a new life. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. These other stories will also move you. Click to continue watching.